Hello and welcome back to Whiskey Uncorked. My name is Brian and today we're here on location in Kenosha, Wisconsin, my hometown. I'm here over the holidays and decided to shoot some videos with my brother, who's been a major part of my whiskey journey. They've pretty much been in sync other than a few months or so, and just figured we'd take an opportunity to talk about our experiences and some things that are important to us and how we've kind of gotten to where we're at with our particular journeys. So my brother, he's my younger brother. His name's Kevin.
Hello.
And so why don't we first start with just a quick introduction of what we're drinking here today?
Yeah, sounds good. This is kind of a warm-up dram, first one of the night. So this is just a nice classic Glencadam 10, nice and fruity, very almost kind of a summery drink, but it's also pretty clean. So
awesome. Yeah, Glencadam 10 is a great one. I'm drinking the Edgedour 12 Caledonia, which was definitely a whiskey when my first bottle. When I first drank it, it was like, what the hell is this? And then by the time I was done with the bottle, I was like, oh my God, I got to find some more of this. So
absolutely,
it's a great one for sure.
Yeah, almost the opposite end of the spectrum. One sounds a little dirty. This one's a little clean. So.
Very herbal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so for this first video, I think what we're going to talk about is blind tasting, because that's been a major part of our whiskey journey or development. I think it's influenced what we both like.
Absolutely.
And being that we've lived at least 1,000 miles apart from each other for most of our journeys, it's been a great
all
way.
Of our journeys.
Yeah, basically all of it. Yeah. Minus like the pre.
Yeah, you started early. Yep.
Well, yeah. Even like just in my 20s, and I think even before you, we wanted to like whiskey. We were trying to figure out how. So,
yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so basically, blind tastings have been a part of our journey together, and it's been a way for us to share, even being so far apart. So, I guess let's start with kind of the story of how we started and kind of where that we're at now and how blinds affect what we're tasting. So as you mentioned, I kind of got like into whiskey a little bit before you, and I knew you kind of wanted to like whiskey because you were like me, you'd buy the occasional bottle and try to convince yourself it tasted good and all that stuff.
Yep.
So when I figured it out and started to click for me, I got really excited and started sending you samples. They weren't blinds.
Right.
They were essentially blind to you, I think.
Yeah, they were blind to me because while they had the labels and the names on them, I didn't know A from B or Lagavulin from Knob Creek or anything. So
yeah, right.
It was just kind of nonsense at the time.
Yeah. So it started out that way, and we would get on Zoom. I think that was after the pandemic started, or did it start?
Zoom was definitely post the first month or two of the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I moved to Denver right after the pandemic started. So it started like in March, and I moved in May, and I think it was pretty shortly after that.
It must have been somewhere right around there.
So we started just sending samples, getting together on Zoom, and going through them, and eventually you started buying your own bottles.
Yep.
And at some point it clicked, and you had enough to send me samples.
Yep.
And so then we started doing them blind. I think you started watching either the Aquavitae blind.
Yeah, it was the Aquavitae blind segments. He used to do specifically he'd send boxes out to YouTubers, and they would do them blind and then send the video back. As soon as I found those, I watched all of them day one, and the whole idea just fascinated me because that's essentially what I was doing with the samples you were sending me.
Right.
And then just kind of watching these YouTubers who know what they're doing supposedly try to navigate through the box, and I could kind of connect with them in some ways. So that was really fun, and that definitely launched me into the stratosphere of getting into whiskey. So
so basically since then, that's what now, almost 4 years ago or something like that. It'll be 4 years this spring.
We're over 3 years for sure.
Yeah. Yep. We've been doing blinds essentially every other week, getting on Zoom, unless our schedule gets disrupted by us visiting one or the other. But essentially, yeah, we've been doing a blind every 2 weeks, four samples apiece. Definitely has taught us some alcohol intake management along the way.
Yeah.
Because when that's a lot of
Yeah.
whiskey, a lot of times they're cast
The
strength.
first year or two might get a little excessive. I
Yeah.
think we've managed to rein it in most of the time.
Wednesdays were rough.
Wednesday mornings used to be a little rough. Yep.
Luckily, we're working from home, and the camera always stayed off on meetings those days. So, but yeah, we're better with that now. But yeah, we're still doing it now. I think it probably means a little different, I think, to me now than it did back then. But from your perspective, obviously, you said you connected with the blinds, just doing the blinds and kind of sorting through everything. Obviously, removing bias is one thing, but is there anything else that you can say about how they've been important to you over your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, first off, it's just kind of, how I grew up in the hobby. It showed me so many things about flavors, about experiences, about, basically everything you look for. It kind of taught me in hyperdrive to explore whiskeys in different ways and figure out what I was drinking. Just one example that springs to mind, and I'm sure you'll remember, back, 2.5 years ago, you would send me Springbanks, and I didn't like them.
I believe the quote was, "This is kind of boring."
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. And I was just sitting there like,
yeah, which
what?
I'll call it an underdeveloped palate, but you can call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
But he was persistent. He every once in a while another one would show up in a blind, and they'd go from fourth to third, and then pretty consistently eventually first once I learned to love it. So you learn to kind of open things up, because if I had just realized I didn't like it and then just refused, wasn't doing blinds anymore, and people would offer me Springbanks, I would, your first mental reaction would just be like, no, I know I don't like that. When a lot of it's like, like everyone says, it's a journey. You just don't like it yet, as Roy would say.
Yeah,
so.
I was persistent. I was like, "There's no way he's gonna get out of this without liking Springbank." So, I got there, and you've got a pretty nice selection over there yourself. So
yeah, it's ballooned in 3 years.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, let's see. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's pretty much the same way. I mean, I probably didn't come into it thinking, "Oh, blinds are important to begin with." And I think this might lead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, there's one more thing that is almost like a second aspect to it.
Okay, sure.
I think, the blind itself, kind of like what I just talked about, but it also just provides sort of like an anchor experience for the moment. It gives you something to build off of, whether it's, me and you who have been doing it for 3 or 4 years, we talk every other week. So, some weeks, discussion topics in terms of just like hanging out, sometimes they can be a little bit hard to find because we've been talking about it so much. But once we get into the whiskey, things grow, and someone will say something, and then it can grow from there. And alternatively, if you're a newer person and you're like at like a whiskey meetup or a whiskey club, and it gives something for everyone to focus on, and it can help provide that social glue to kind of get everyone involved. So I think even in the non-whiskey sense, it can provide, it can be a useful tool for just interacting in social experiences.
Yeah, I think it takes away the pressure of like getting the notes right and that sort of thing. Like if you say, "Oh, hey, this is a Springbank," as we're talking about, then everyone's going to say, "Oh, well, it's funky," because it's just they know it's supposed to be that, and they don't. Yeah, they don't want to like be wrong. So, or even if it's peated, and maybe some people can't even tell that it's peated. But if it's blind, everyone could just kind of give their honest opinion, and then chances are everyone's going to be a little bit different, and it's highly unlikely that anyone's going to feel like completely left out. But I've definitely been in some larger group blinds where it seems like that's been the case. It kind of kickstarts the ability for people to start conversing with each other, even though they might not know each other well, because it takes away that pressure of like, am I supposed to know what this is?
Yep, absolutely.
But yeah, I think blinds have been really important, like you said. Well, first, being that we've been apart for so long, I think that's something I mentioned a couple weeks ago. Even though it kind of feels like our journeys have been really kind of tied at the hip, because they've lined up pretty closely, and we share almost every bottle we buy, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, we've still had an opportunity to kind of explore on our own without constantly influencing each other. So like we have a lot of similar things on our shelves, but also some very, very different things. So
That is true.
which is great because that means our blinds aren't always the same when we send each other stuff.
Yep.
But it's given us that opportunity to find something interesting and put it into a blind and actually look forward to that person tasting it and finding out what they think of it before, without even knowing, that you have it, possibly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. There have definitely been times where, especially he's in town for a couple of weeks, but I'm about to, send him a new box. Sometimes I want to like hide bottles so, he doesn't know I have them, so that when they show up in the blind, he's even more surprised because, especially when I had a smaller collection, when we're doing the blinds, he'd be like, okay, he'd kind of know what my collection was. So he'd be like, all right, is this or that or that? Luckily now I think that's less of an issue because I have quite a bit to choose from. But
definitely not trying to guess bottles as much anymore.
But no, it's definitely fun when you could kind of they nose it or taste it and they go, whoa, what the hell is that?
Weird stuff, yeah. So how would you say that blinds have affected your preferences and the bottles that you buy now over the years? Do you have examples of things that you almost certainly might not have bought without blinds?
Well, yeah, just kind of to briefly go back to the example previously, Springbanks.
Of course, yeah.
That was definitely a big eye opener. To tie in, kind of when you started sending me stuff, and I was kind of trying all these different things. I was also a big Parks and Rec fan, and as anybody who's seen Parks and Rec or is even familiar with it, Nick Offerman, even in the show, he's a big Lagavulin 16 fan. That's kind of like one of the running gags throughout the show. And me being susceptible to those kind of marketing gimmicks, and I loved the character, I loved the show, so I wanted to go grab me a bottle, of Lagavulin 16. And actually at the time I wasn't willing to quite pay the price of Lagavulin 16, so I actually found Lagavulin 8.
Which is higher proof.
Higher proof.
Probably non-chill
filter. Bit more of an intense flavor.
Yeah.
And while I didn't even immediately necessarily fall in love with it, but that combined with some of the peated stuff you were sent me, I think in combination sort of went like, oh, I think this is what's for me. So I dove headfirst into that peated subworld. Lagavulin, it did not take me very long at all. Once I found my first, I actually forget if Ugadal or Ardbeg 10 was first, but once I had that was one of my first big bottles. So definitely blinds mixed with sort of a love for the show launched me headfirst into the world of peated Scotch. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but
that's fine. So you're less of a peat head now. You still love your peat for sure.
I'm more well-rounded. Like there are certainly still, I've got a whole cabinet committed to basically just peated whiskeys. So yeah, definitely.
Would you say blinds played a part in that as well?
Oh yeah. So I think that was actually my original point, was that I started out as this peat head, and then you sending me specifically, I think more like older, delicate bourbon barrel stuff. Really kind of opened my eyes, because I think my first journey, and you hear about this sometimes, that's like a good chunk of people, they start out with these intense, big, bold, in-your-face flavors. Like that's kind of what they like. That's what gets them into it. They find that interesting. And then over time, they can kind of almost warm up to the more subtle, nuanced, delicate, lighter stuff. And that's where I am almost typically now, at least recently in my journey. Now that it's winter, I've been getting, dabbling more back in the sherry and peated stuff. But yeah, no, this last summer I would say almost exclusively looking for like teenaged bourbon barrel type stuff because of the blinds.
Yeah, I was trying to think of how, I had this, if I had any similar experiences to that or effects on my buying stuff. And I think for me, it was more specific bottles. There's a number of bottles I think I bought specifically because of how much I liked it during a blind. I think one of the first ones that I can think of was like the Ben Riach 12, the Smoky 12.
Mm-hmm.
It won the blind, and I like that weekend. I like what or no, that was I think the first time I came to Kenosha to visit
Mm-hmm.
after that. I think I made sure I grabbed a bottle
Yeah,
of it.
that one was up against some good, stiff competition.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't a slouch.
More recently, I had bought a bottle of it. It was the Long Row Red 15 Pinot Noir, and I
Mm-hmm.
had it, and I hadn't opened it yet. And you sent it to me in a blind, and I immediately went on an auction and got another. It's like there is definitely no way I'm not gonna have a backup of that. It was so good.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think of like style wise if it's had as much of an impact on me. Because I'm pretty coming from like the beer world. I like to try everything anyways. So I've always been pretty open minded in terms of
Sure. Yep.
what I'd like. But I think so. I think sometimes you just send me a bottle that's like, there's no way I'm gonna go on with my life without having one of those. But they definitely have cost me a few dollars extra on top of the shipping fees.
Yeah, that tends to happen. Another aspect I thought of, so definitely mainly a Scotch whiskey guy. My second category is rye whiskey. Especially this last year, that's another category that's been growing for me. I've always been kind of middling on bourbon, at least in my own like solitude experience away from our interactions together. Anytime like I pour and I sip a bourbon, I enjoy it, I like it, but it doesn't quite give me the magic that I get from some of the other styles. But whenever you do send me like this cask strength big bourbon blind, more often than not, I'm melting and how good it is and the experience, which is not an experience I'd be able to find at least historically by myself. So that's another thing that blinds can do is maybe if I'm not into bourbon, but I can still have that outlets to experience some of those things in a way that works and is really nice.
I think, yeah, for me that happens as well, but it's more like the big peaty like wine influence stuff that you send me. I like those normally. I have plenty of them on my shelf, but when you send them to me, they just taste like pure dessert. Like they're like 10 times better when I'm drinking them blind, and it's frustrating that I can't like repeat the same experience of sitting
exactly.
But yeah, I don't know what it is. It's weird.
But I don't understand it either.
I can sympathize there. All right, so going forward, now that we've kind of gained all this experience, we're still relatively early on in the whole journey thing. Although you and I have gone head first for sure. We've had the accelerated learning plan, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But now as your foundation, your base of whiskey knowledge, whiskey preferences is more sturdy. It's never going to be set in stone completely.
No, of course not.
Do you think that blinds are going to have a similar influence on you going forward, or do you think this is more of like they're just fun to do?
Well, I mean, I don't think that that'll ever go away in terms of that sort of being surprised or maybe being taken aback or whatever. But I think more often than not nowadays we're looking for new experiences, and we just want to kind of hang out for a couple hours on the internet, talk for a while. But the discovery and the exploration, that'll never go away, even if over time we feel like we become more and more acclimated to these things. But this last Zoom or maybe the one before, you sent me a whiskey that I didn't even think was whiskey. I believe it was finished or matured in Amburana casks, and I'd never even had it. I've never had an Amburana cask before, and that thing blew my brain open. I had no clue what was going on. I was stuttering and trying to search for notes because it was so weird and different. Yeah. So I still think over time, you'll still have those experiences, even if maybe they do happen less and less. Just in terms of like a brand new shocking experience.
In terms of, so obviously I've been doing this series that kind of has revolved around bias and whiskey, and one of the main purposes that people state for doing blinds is to challenge your biases.
Yep.
And that sort of thing. But I think we both mentioned instances where we may have some bias in our head, or it's just for some reason whiskey tastes different when we're drinking it blind than when we're having it kind of sitting by ourselves in our whiskey cave.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always kind of thought that about blinds too, in terms of just, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's more important what it tastes like when you're just when you know what it is, because most of the time you're going to know what it is. And that's why I love doing blinds, and like I said, they've opened my mind up to different bottles and obviously different styles, especially now. With you getting more into ryes, you've got quite a American single malt collection growing as well.
I've got a small one. It's something I'm dabbling in. It's maybe not a passion quite yet, but I love Scotch malt whiskey, so I'm seeing what America has to offer too.
Yeah, but yeah, at the end of the day, like, it's good to keep you in check. I think you kind of said, like,
yeah, no, it's like blinds. Blinds are a tool. They shouldn't. I guess it maybe not shouldn't, but that's unlikely. That's going to be your primary way of exploring whiskey, right? Just doing blind after blind after blind. Yeah. But blinds can certainly help you find out. Oh, maybe I do like this. Maybe I should explore this when I am by myself.
Especially when it's a special bottle. I think I've said this before. Like,
yes,
you bring on the bias. Like, let my mind trick me into believing that this is the best whiskey ever.
Yeah. If somebody hands you a Brora 38, you probably want to know it's a Brora 38, and that's 100% yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we have a tacit agreement not to send each other like all-time epic drams. Like, let's let ourselves be biased with
those bottles are not for exploring and experimenting with. Those, so we're on the same page there, 100%.
All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about in terms of blinds? Any other huge points that you brought up, or things you're looking to get out of it in the future?
Nothing revolutionary. It's just more let's keep each other on our toes. Let's both kind of exploring what's new, what's coming out, maybe something that we've both missed. Particularly maybe those distilleries that don't have core ranges, or that are hard to get, especially on this side of the pond.
Yeah.
The Strathmills and the Altavanias and that kind of stuff. That's a really great way for us to even just explore new distilleries we still haven't tried. So
in terms of here's a question before we wrap things up. If you had someone else who was expressing interest in getting into whiskey, would you recommend that they start doing blinds immediately? Or would you say maybe wait till they get their feet under them, since you kind of started doing them almost immediately?
I think it depends on their interest level. I think if it's something they just want to poke their head in and see what's going on, probably no. Because some of my friends, obviously they've noticed the stash of bottles down here when they come down here, and they want to taste something. They kind of want to see what it's about. Then for them, I would say maybe no. Let's start you off with a couple, but I'm going to tell you what they are. I'm going to tell you what maybe to expect. However, if you're at the point now where you've tried several whiskeys, you enjoy it, and you really want to take that second step into the hobby, then yes, I think blinds are a great doorway into just figuring out what's out there.
I totally agree. All right, well, how about this? It sounds like the family's home. Why don't we wrap this video up? We're going to do a few more of these while we're here, hopefully. But I think blinds are as you mentioned, a great tool. I wouldn't completely change everything about whiskey based on one blind, but over time I think you can start to learn some really useful things about yourself and your preferences and what's out there in the whiskey world. And I think we both had experiences that back that up. But with that, thank you everyone for tuning in. Click like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that sort of stuff, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.